All right. Today on The Endless Hustle, we welcome on Scott Dixon, five-time IndyCar champion, five-time ESPY nominee for Best Driver, Indy 500 winner, and also British royalty, believe it or not. Scott was honored by Queen Elizabeth II on the 66th anniversary of her coronation as Queen of the United Kingdom. Do we have to call you Sir Dixon for this interview, or is Scott cool?
Scott's perfectly okay. I think I'm like right under the sir part. I think next is knighthood, so I'm not quite there on that list. But
the only reason we agreed to do this interview is because we thought you were sir. Now, if you're not.
Oh, sorry, man. Sorry. Should we just end it now?
All right, Scott, I want to start off from the very beginning. For a guy like me who's like an outsider to the sport, it seems like there is like a huge barrier to entry for racing. There's that old story of Andre Agassi's dad attaching tennis balls to a mobile above his crib so he can smack them. But as a young kid, you can't just hop into your mom's Honda and take it for a spin. When and how do you first gain the skill set that plant the seed to become a successful driver?
That's a tough one. I would say that it's definitely, you need family. It's not like going to school and playing tennis. In Agassi's situation, it's not like they're going to have a go-kart or something there that you can jump into. So you need a mum or dad that's going to buy you a $1,000 or more go-kart. And for me, it was my dad was into racing. My mum a little bit too. They owned a track actually in Townsville, in Australia. And my earliest memories were actually starting on a motorbike and on dirt track stuff. And then it was watching my cousins race go-karts at the age of 7. And at the end of the day, they had this like portion where you could, anybody that came could have a go. And that's what I did. And then I was just relentless, every day continuously. Can I get a go-kart? Can I get a go-kart? And 2 weeks later, ended up doing it. And I think that's where I, kind of learned, the majority of at least early stuff of what you need to do and progresses quite quickly in the lower categories and in go-karting. And then you move on to formula cars, which, I think I was the youngest in the world at that stage at the age of 13. And we kind of got through a bit of a loophole to try and pull that off in New Zealand. I think it's a progressional thing, but my dad was, he raced many things from rally cars to dirt cars to, permanent track stuff. And he was a big part of, my early learning and understanding the sport.
So obviously, Matt read off your statistics, and you're probably the most successful current living driver in the sport. We know what you've done on the racetrack. I want to talk to you about what you're doing off the racetrack, because a big part of this podcast and a big part of what we want to explore is how athletes are building their brand outside of the sport. What are you doing now, and when did you start doing and understanding that, hey, racing is not forever. I need to start thinking about the world outside of this and start really taking those steps, and what are those steps?
I think everybody's different. There's some people. I'm pretty kind of reclusive, I guess, and not sort of. I'm not a big promoter of myself. It's kind of weird. Like I like to let my results speak for themselves, and I think you do learn at a portion. For me, probably 5 years ago that it becomes much more important. And yes, you're right. I think with any professional sport, it's a pretty small window, and your avenues kind of outside of it, and are similar to maybe football or anything like that, where you become into, driver coach or, work with a team in management to, maybe even being an agent for, young and up and comers. So, I think for me, it's still, it's been really about the focus of what I've got here, because it's such a short window. I don't really want to have too many things that sway you off in different directions. The point for me right now, where the iron, you got to strike while the iron's hot. But in this situation too, with 5 championships going for a 6th, you start to have these amazing partners. And for me, it's been Honda throughout many of my years of racing, Richard Millet, watch companies, to the team and who they have, PNC Bank, and these are things that people that you start to work with and kind of morph into, obviously, their social media stuff as well, that fits well. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is not saturating with content. It's got to be good and meaningful content, and I'm probably more on the light side of not doing enough of it. But when I do, I try to make sure that it's meaningful and something that, will work for both parties and kind of intrigue others that want to, get into maybe that area as well.
I must have watched your crash from the 2017 Indy 500 about 10 times last night, and I'm still trying to figure out how you walked away from it. And not only that, I watched an interview right after, and you gave it like you just got an fender bender. It was amazing. You truly were the Iceman. How vividly do you remember that incident? And is that something that happened in a blink of an eye, or does time kind of stop?
Yeah, so that incident was pretty unique. I think the ones that stick with drivers, or at least the mindset, are the ones where you lose control of the car by something you've done. That was just wrong place, wrong time. There was no real way of avoiding it unless you kind of got lucky, and I didn't get lucky. I got lucky in the fact that the way I hit and flew through the air, at 230 miles an hour, that luckily I kind of grazed a few spots. Had I got caught in the catch fence, those things for our cars are kind of just like big cheese graters, and that would have been really bad. So I think for me, I remember coming to a rest and looking up and seeing half the car in front of me, and I'm like, man, I hope that person's okay. And then I stepped out of my car and I'm like, wow, that was actually my car. That's half of the car that's missing. So it's I think you're still in a lot of shock at those points. The adrenaline's an amazing thing, man. Like I felt when I popped out of that car, I'm like, you feel like King Kong. I didn't feel too bad. You walk away. And then I remember actually sitting at the motorhome after. I actually sat back and watched the rest of the race, having a cold beer. I'm like, man, my foot's really starting to hurt. And, you look down and it's kind of blown up, and I'd actually fractured my ankle, which was, pretty crazy considering the size of the crash. But yeah, that one, we were also shooting a film at the time called Born Racer, which was, kind of a little bit about my career and IndyCar as a whole. So that crash I've seen so many times, man. The edits that they were sending through to the different views from people's personal camera footage was insane. So yeah, I've definitely, and I think it was kind of one of the part of the promo stuff for IndyCar at that stage as well. So it was pumped everywhere. So luckily now they've actually slowed down on showing that, but it was definitely impressive and very lucky, and a testament to the safety of the IndyCar series.
So Matt mentioned your nickname being the Iceman, but you're probably the second most famous Iceman in the world, because the most famous is, of course, Val Kilmer from Top Gun. They're making a second one now. And that makes me think about Tom Cruise. He obviously did Days of Thunder, but he's probably the biggest adrenaline junkie and take a risk junkie in Hollywood. So if we threw you Tom Cruise for a day, how do you think he would do in an IndyCar? Would he be able to get up to top speed? Would he crash? What's your thoughts?
So yeah, I think he's a machine, man, and honestly, he hasn't aged a bit, which is maybe is part of that the world that he's living in. But I think I saw something recently where he was planning to do all of his own stunts, which he has always, and then he's going into space for the next movie. It's astonishing. But I think I'm not sure if you guys know that, but I think through the Paul Newman years, when they were very good friends, Tom actually drove race cars and did some, I think, Trans Am racing. Not too many races, but was actually fairly good, considering that he hadn't had a whole lot of background in it. But no, I imagine he would knock it out of the park. He would look real good doing it as well, and
he doesn't age, of course.
Exactly, and he would pack the stands, man. So I think that's a great idea. Let's get Tom Cruise driving the IndyCar.
I'm always fascinated by the stunt drivers in like any of those Bond movies, the Fast and Furious movies. Is that job as hard as it looks, or is it a cakewalk for drivers like yourself?
It's actually quite difficult. I would say I'm not particularly good at like drifting or it's definitely a skill set that is very difficult, and you do have a bit of a crossover with some drivers in junior categories that come from that movie portion of creating these movies and these chase scenes and things like that, and I have actually the crew chief on the number 9 IndyCar that I drive is very good at that stuff. Like it's astonishing to me when I sit in the passenger seat. I think I'm constantly going to be crashing, but he's totally under control. So it's something that I would definitely have to work at, I think, to possibly pull it off. But for us, as soon as we get into your like maybe 7 degrees, the car loses a ton of downforce and wants to spin out. So we're talking like small amounts of sideways, which doesn't look impressive compared to what they do. But yeah, it's tough. I think I'd need some lessons on that stuff.
Is there a movie for you, Scott? Like, I loved Ford versus Ferrari last year, and I thought they did an insane job of really showing the racing process. What movie do you think has captured what you guys do to the ultimate extreme?
Days of Thunder is a go-to for me. So is Talladega Nights. I think it's a really good spin on NASCAR,
If you're in first, you're
a
last,
lot
baby.
of it. Yeah, a lot of it is kind of true, man. So it's I think you're definitely right. Ford versus Ferrari, and for me, there was a lot of those stories that I didn't really know too much about, even though I was very lucky to be a part of the Ford program going back 50 years later with Chip Ganassi Racing, and we, I was third in our car, but our teammates went on to win 50 years later to the day, which was astonishing, and that's where I think the site for the movie kind of came out of. But it's funny, the twists that they put on even what was somewhat reality and what wasn't. Having heard the stories after the film had been out and talking to a lot of friends maybe of Ken Miles, and how he was portrayed in it was a little bit different. But I think the great thing that they've been doing lately is hitting the right milestones and the accuracies, but also putting a slight twist on it to make sure that the crowd and the people are really ingrained into the movie. So yeah, that I think for a modern day version of that and what they did and what they were able to achieve with that movie, it's extremely tough, for drivers and people that are maybe historians of those events. You notice little things, you'll be like, oh, that's not the right car, or that's not even that corner, or that's not even that track. Or, I think even there was a portion where they were doing the Daytona 24-hour or something like that leading up to Le Mans. And you're like, well, that's California Speedway, and it's got safer barriers, and safer barriers were never introduced into the 2000s. So you pick things like that, out of it. But that was a fantastic movie that was able to show you the history of it and what they did, and also make sure that the fans and people involved, absolutely loved it. And it was a great movie.
I'm going to take you guys to English class for this next one. Ernest Hemingway once wrote, auto racing, bullfighting, and mountain climbing are the only real sports. All others are games. Scott, many people don't view drivers as athletes in the traditional sense, but you've had an impressive run on American Ninja Warrior, and Sports Science did a segment featuring willpower that demonstrated the insane reaction time speed necessary to succeed in racing. How much of racing can be attributed to a physical skill set, and how much is more mental endurance?
It's probably a pretty good mix, depending on the circuit. And that's where, the NTT IndyCar series is, in my view, one of the toughest championships to win, because you've got so many different disciplines. You've got short track ovals, super speedways, road courses, and street courses, and no other championship does that. And to win the championship, you've got to be good at all of them. And they require very different skill sets. The ovals, say the Indianapolis 500, which is still the largest, single day sporting event in the world, as far as attendance, it mentally is so draining, for that 3.5 hour period. You're racing against your fellow competitors, 32 others, at 230 plus miles an hour, inches apart. The consequences are extremely high, and trying to judge, those distances and everything going on is mentally draining. And then you go to where we kick off maybe the season each year at St. Petersburg, Florida, which is a street course. Extremely physical. It's very bumpy, high G forces, up to 5 Gs in the corners. Your average heart rate, depending on, where who you are and how you're built, is 160 to 180 for a 2.5 hour period. So I think, like any sport, they've evolved so much in the areas that if you try to push the limits, I've worked with Pit Fit Training here in Indianapolis for almost 20 years. And they keep pushing the boundaries. First of all, it was kind of like, if you ran a little bit, or if you did some triathlons, that would kind of help. And now it's kind of moved into a cross of, all of the endurance stuff, plus a program with, extreme, lifting and the reaction testing and protocols that we use. So it does change a lot. So I train, 6 days a week. I would say 4 days of those are twice a day. So 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. For me, it's kind of something else I got sucked into too. I love competition, and, so I do triathlons, half Ironmans and things like that as well. And it complements the sport quite well. So yeah, it's a very physical sport because the cars just become faster and, more difficult to drive. The competition is through the roof, so it's just it's a constant evolution. If you're not covering all the bases, you're not going to win.
There was some pretty earth-shattering news. Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace have teamed up to form their own team in NASCAR. What are your thoughts, Scott, on the impact that's going to have on racing in general to see the GOAT of basketball and arguably the GOAT of sport, and then two of the biggest names of their sport partnering up?
Yeah, it's huge. I know, Jordan's been a fan of motor racing for quite some time, and obviously has been tight friends with Denny for many years. I think even if you look at, the outfit that Denny wears, it's a Jordan, race suit, and I'm not sure he's wearing real Jordan shoes, but they've got a Jordan on them. But it's cool to see, I think, even the strange year with COVID, and then, many other, kind of news headlines, I think, throughout the year, and even Black Lives Matter, and just the different things that have come out of it have been really big and really life changing. And for all of us, are going to change, life in a lot of ways, which is fantastic because it's part of, what we're all, need to be doing. And I think that just shows, it took maybe a situation of this craziness of this year that, Jordan's like, I want to get into this deeper, and I want to be part of it, and what a great partnership with Denny, who's very good friends with, Bubba Wallace, and to all knit that together. And then obviously the community of, what Jordan's been involved with basketball and, baseball and anything like that, and the following that he has. It's huge for NASCAR, but huge for, motorsports in general. Yeah, I think a few people were pretty shocked about how that came about and how quickly it actually tied together. But it
started as a joke, didn't it? It started as like fake news was circulating, and then I guess Denny texted or Michael texted him and was like, I guess we're doing this now.
Yeah. Which the cool part with Jordan, though, is that he's like, I only want to do it if we're going to be able to win.
Yeah.
And which, that's big, man. Like, because a lot of people don't, think that way and don't get involved, for that reason. It could be, political, whether it's, sponsors or anything like that. But, that shows just, who that person is and how he's been so great. And, they're going to be super successful, man. So it's great to see.
Is there any celebrity or public figure who you would be your like white whale to team up with?
So I think it's kind of happening. I know it comes from a similar, well, it's from motor racing, but Jimmie Johnson, 7-time NASCAR champion, is hoping to join our team in IndyCar next year. So he's making a big shift in a discipline that he hasn't been a part of. But I've always been a massive fan of Jimmy's. We're actually pretty good friends. We chat every week. But to see someone that has achieved so much, and in some ways getting on a little bit for motor racing, he's maybe 45 or something, to still have this drive, and the guy is relentless, man. Like, it'll be 5 a.m, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, see all these messages from Jimmie Johnson saying, well, what about this? How do I train for this? Or should I get this part for the simulator? Like, it's constant. You can see again why the guy has been so successful. So that's kind of, I would say, like that's and it's going to be in close quarters, man. Hopefully if they pull the deal off, you're not going to be working hand in hand with them.
Who is the most famous celebrity you have in your phone, Scott? So for instance, like Lewis Hamilton probably has on speed dial everybody in Hollywood. Who does Scott Dixon have on his phone that he could call up right now and be like, yo, bro or sis, what up?
Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm not really in that world. I've got Lewis Hamilton's number, so I guess that maybe, maybe helps a little bit. But yeah, it's I don't know. Like John Mayer, I've met a few times through. So I'm into other hobbies as well, and watch collecting has been a big part for probably the last 20 years of my life. John, I've I've met a few times and messaged, because of the collecting world and watches and things like that, and met up with them. I think was it start of this year or something. So, but yeah, I don't know, man. I'm pretty much
He's a simple man.
a simple person. I don't it's more about, I think, finding likenesses of hobbies and things like that for me. So
I hate to bring up bad memories again, but you celebrated your Indy 500 by getting robbed at gunpoint while at Taco Bell drive-thru. Can you run us through what it was like?
Yeah, so that was 2017, right? I think we just won the Indianapolis 500 pole. We hadn't won the race. It was before the race, and yeah, it was Dario Franchitti and myself, and the media portion goes on for quite some time. We were meant to go to some restaurant in downtown Indianapolis, and then it was like 9:30 or something. So I was like, I think Taco Bell will probably be my last meal. I'm kind of easy like that. So I said to Dario, well, let's just go, we'll go to Taco Bell. And so we drove down there, and we're sitting waiting in the line. And I remember seeing, out of the corner of my eye, something kind of go behind the car. And then all of a sudden there was a gun in the car. And I'm like, oh my God, but I thought it was because in our racing, and especially during the month of May, there's a lot of people, teams, drivers, everybody hangs out for a large portion of the time, and there's a lot of pranks that are put on. So I'm like, oh man, this has got to be Tony Kanaan. Like, he's going to pop out of a hedge over here shortly, and be like, we got you guys. And now I'm like looking at the gun, and I'm like, man, that gun looks really real. And then on Dario's side of the car, there was another person trying to smash the window. And I'm like, oh my God, this is getting like really serious. Like, this is a pretty big joke. And then he was asking for wallets and stuff. And I didn't have my wallet on me because it had been locked in the transporter. So I'd actually had my wife's, her wallet. And I was like, well, here's a wallet. There's going to be nothing in it apart from some credit cards. Dario, being the Scotsman that he is and has alligator arms, couldn't even reach for his wallet. And luckily a car pulled up behind us, and they skated off. But yeah, super intense. It was the weirdest thing where everything slowed down. And the funniest part was then at the little speaker box, the person at Taco Bell was like, so you guys going to order? Like, what's taking so long? And I was like, oh my God, did you not just see what happened? So luckily, like 2 hours later, they could see what car these person were driving in, and they ended up, finding the two people that did it. But yeah, that was nuts. Yeah.
Did you end up getting the Gordita Crunch though? That's most important.
We did, man. The cheesy Gordita Crunch. I get that instead of with beef, I get those with beans, and luckily we got it for free. I will say Indianapolis was amazing, man. It would have been maybe a minute, and there was about 30 police cars there, so we were in good hands. But yeah, it turned out that they were part of like some big gang from Chicago, and we're very lucky that it didn't turn any worse. But yeah, that was a crazy day. And then a week later I had that big crash as well. So not a great month.
I was just watching Aaron Rodgers versus Drew Brees on Sunday Night Football, and those two dudes are absolutely ageless. We're seeing more longevity in sports across all sports. How, for you, Scott, will you know when you're done? Like, when is it time to hang up the keys and be like, off into the sunset?
I totally agree with you, and it's great to see, even the likes of Brady, and what he's been able to achieve in football. But, tennis with Nadal and Federer, I think you're starting to see these longevities, and I think it's there's a lot more tools these days, I think, and understanding the body, nutrition, and the fixes that you can get if you've got, something going on, I think definitely helps. I think for everybody, it's just a personal choice. I think for me, I think it's probably when the smaller things really start to annoy you. It's probably a good sign of like, you're starting to get over the situation. For me, the drive is still there. The competition is what really drives me in the sport at the moment. And it's definitely, the highest that it's ever been, so I don't know, the fire burns strong. Even talking to, fellow competitors, with Jimmie, he just decided, he's like, hey, I'm ready to try something totally different. And that maybe is where it goes. His shift has been pretty big to, Dario, I think it's set like a number. He was like, once I get to 40, I'm done, so people approach it differently. and Dario's situation ended a lot differently with a big crash and a major concussion that kind of sat him out. But I think he really misses the sport and misses racing. And I think had he not had that situation, would actually be continuing to do it. And for us, there's different phases, right? IndyCar is probably the most competitive right now. Then you can do sports car racing, Daytona 24 hour, Sebring 12 hour, those things are a little more relaxed with schedule wise. But I think that's, for me at this point with family, with two girls, 9 and 11, and then we have a 9-month-old, and going back to that reset, you don't have much time on your hands, and that's I think gives you a little bit of insight of time to wind it down maybe at some point. But for me right now, it's flat out, man. I'm very lucky, very privileged. I love doing what I do, and hopefully I can do it for a while longer.
Because of the danger of the sport, is there a conversation that's happened with your family where you guys have had to discuss what if the worst happens, what happens next?
I think a lot of the times it's one of those things that's in the back of your mind, but you don't really talk about it. Well, fortunately, our sport has got a lot safer. I think if you look at the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, drivers were losing best friends every other week. I've been in a couple of bad situations, with Tony Renner and then Dan Weldon and Justin Wilson of most recent, where you lose good friends to the sport. And I think the way you kind of run it through your mind is like, well, they were doing what they loved. They had spent so much time getting to where they were, and a lot of discipline and sacrifices, not for just him but also his family. His life would have been much worse had he not got to his goal or achieved it or anything like that. So I don't know. I think there's many different ways to look at it. I think a lot of people in dangerous sports are very good at not thinking about it. At least, I think with getting ready for a race, it's the same triggers that, I've had since I was doing go-karts, the kind of the right glove on before the left glove, and how you get into the car always from the left side, things like that are kind of they kind of set you into a mode where you don't really think about those situations. But I don't know. My wife she was a runner for Great Britain. So she was, an extreme athlete in the sense of a runner, and very competitive and very good, with going to Commonwealth Games and being on Olympic rosters and things like that. And she understands, I think, the sacrifice and just the mindset that people have when they get to that level, that, for her, it says it right on the back of the ticket, motor racing is dangerous. But for me, I feel so lucky to do what I do, and the love that I have for it, I wouldn't want it any other way.
Good perspective. Do you have any pre-race superstitions, or do you have any habits, or you eat the same meal every day before the race?
It's really just I got to eat. If I don't eat, man, I'm hangry, and that's not a great way to start the race. You're going to be crashing and taking people out. So I typically like to get a good meal. Most of the time it's just pretty bland. It's pasta, chicken, pasta, avocado, tomatoes. It's pretty bland because these races can be fairly long. You need the energy, and you don't want your stomach turning too bad because you can't stop for a loo break. So and then I would say take a nap. One thing I try to do is have at least an hour before the race that's kind of clear, and then get maybe a 20-minute nap in. But a lot of the times, schedule wise, that's just not possible, and especially this year with how the schedules are really cramped. That hasn't been possible. But that's my perfect day: good meal, little nap, and then get ready to go.
So Christian Bale has played Ken Miles. Chris Hemsworth has played James Hunt. Daniel Bruhl has played Niki Lauda. Who's playing Scott Dixon in the Scott Dixon biopic? Which A-list?
I imagine my wife would say Brad Pitt, because we look so similar. But no, I don't know, man.
Don't give him that much credit,
He was mega in that Once Upon a Time, man. So I could definitely go down that road. But yeah, I don't know. That's always a tough one. But I think he would do a fantastic job, and he'd make me look good.
I see Aaron Eckhart. I think you look like Aaron.
Oh yeah, there we go.
I would love to see that.
I can see that. I've heard that before, actually.
Scott, the leagues like the NBA have gotten a lot of criticism for being kind of like, especially as of recently, like buddy. Everybody, competitors are, following each other on Instagram and all that noise. Is that kind of similar in racing, or is it more of, you're my enemy for today?
You definitely have competitors that maybe grind your gears a little bit more than others, or you race differently, and I think that goes both ways. So there's definitely competition, and when it's at that height, there's going to be some aggression, and I'd say even if you look at team wise too, there's an immense amount of competition between Chip Ganassi Racing and Penske, to even Andretti Racing. I would say that the IndyCar family as a whole is pretty tight though. I have a lot of great friends that I race against, but once you put the helmet on, kind of it just transitions. Teammates, you kind of give a little bit more room, just because one of the things you get told before the race is don't take your teammate out, and that's from the team owner. So you typically follow those rules pretty good. But yeah, it's I think there's always rivalries and people we feel a little bit differently about. I would say IndyCar could do actually a better job of maybe diving into those, a little bit more for TV and things like that. But I would say on a whole, everybody, I think, it's kind of like a traveling circus. A lot of us are in motorhomes parked right next to each other. We have young families together, the kids play together. So there is that bond that we have, and it's a very dangerous sport too. So, you're not going to do anything that jeopardizes yourself or them in a situation like that.
I always love hearing from athletes, because this is how you can tell who the ultimate competitor is. It's not about what you won. We obviously know Indy 500 is probably at the top of the list of greatest achievements, championships, all great. But I always love hearing from athletes those crushing losses that haunt them, that you talk to them 30 years down the line and they're like, man, I still can't believe I lost that. What's that loss for you? What's the one that you wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats replaying in your mind?
Well, it's not a short list, unfortunately. But you're right. That is the things, because people say, oh, what was your greatest championship? This one and that one, and there are some easy go-to answers for that. But honestly, the things that keep you up at night are the close misses. And this year was one of those. Indianapolis 500, we dominated the race, led 60% of it. And it came down to a late race strategy where all we were doing was waiting for the leader to run out of fuel. Bam, caution comes out. They don't red flag it. They let it run out. And that hurt so bad. I was up for 2 nights trying to think about how we could have played it differently. And honestly, we couldn't have. We ran the perfect race and still finished second. And those are the ones that hurt a lot. And unfortunately, at the Indianapolis 500, I think I've finished second under caution 4 times. So that seems to be something I need to change, or at least the approach of what I do with those closing laps, to make sure, actually 2 or 3 of those times with my damn teammates. So that makes it even worse in a scenario like that. But yeah, you're totally right. Those are the things that keep me up and trying to, better myself as a person and also as a competitor. But I think in our sport too, because strategy is something that's out of your hands. That's where my wife gets so frustrated being a runner. She's the engine, she can do the strategy, she does everything herself, so if she didn't play it, she knew exactly why or what she needed to improve. And sometimes for us, man, you get a strategy shift like that and you're toast, and it's hard to swallow.
We're seeing this incredible age now of activism in sports. When you think back to the 60s, you had people like Muhammad Ali. He really was a pioneer for, when I'm in this position of power and public voice, I can make a difference. Now we're seeing an explosion of that, where athletes really are using their platforms. Sometimes it can become regressive for your career. I mean, Colin Kaepernick's a great example of that, where you can essentially lose your career because of what you say. For an athlete in your position, Scott, how do you balance having a public voice and trying to say things that can help society, while also tiptoeing the other side of the line, which is, hey, I have sponsors, I have fans, I have people that I need to make happy and money that needs to be made? How do you walk that tight line?
The easy answer to that is that it's extremely tough. And, the easy answer is sometimes to try and lay low, even though that might not be your instinct or your true beliefs. And the knock-on effect is really tough. There's some that are maybe in a slightly different situation. It's hard for me to comment a lot of the time on things that are, okay, I've been living in America for a long time and I love this country and, the opportunities that you have here. But, I'm from New Zealand. I spent a lot of time in New Zealand and beliefs and differences and how you were brought up are very different to how a lot of people are brought up in America. So, I think for me, the hardest thing is the knock-on effect. It's not just me. There's up to 600 people at our team. That knock-on effect, depending on how or which way you play it, and if you don't play it right, whether it's with PNC Bank or whether it's with Honda, or it's such a fine line. So I think you need to do it on your own personal time. I think you don't always have to make a splash about it. There are situations that do call for that, but I think you really have to. The biggest thing I've noticed is educating yourself. You have to understand the situation. You have to know why you believe that and understand it, but also talk to friends about it as well. I think there's definitely been a lot of people caught out that just jump to an assumption straight away that can have crazy effects, not on just them and who they are, but teammates, sponsors, partnerships, a lot of different things. So I think you have to be extremely smart and educate yourself and understand what needs to be done properly.
Scott, we'll get you out after this one. I'm just curious, how many speeding tickets have you gotten?
Man, I've been awesome lately. For whatever reason, I've been flying under the radar. I did have here in Indianapolis, we have like a ring road. It's called the 465. So there was a period, I think about 5 years ago, I did get 2 tickets in the space of about 40 minutes by 2 different people, almost in the same spot. And you used to be able to, Indianapolis, IndyCar driver, they'd recognize you, or they'd see your driver's license, and they'd be like, "Oh, don't worry about it." But now, man, it's all electronic. They just kind of scan that thing and it's toast. You can't even try and get out of them anymore. But I think I'm clear on all my points right now. And now you've just jinxed me. I'm probably going to roll out of here and get a ticket in the next 5 minutes. But no, I've been good. But I've definitely had my fair share of tickets. I can tell you that.
All right, Scott Dixon, IndyCar legend, better guy. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Appreciate it. Good to see you guys.
Great seeing you, Scott.